So in this quick tutorial, we'll take a look at run-on sentences, also known as fused sentences. And we'll look at definition of run-on sentences, and we'll take a look at a few examples. So first things first, we're going to change the terminology we're using. So if you've been using the term run-on sentence up to this point, we're going to change our terminology to fused sentences. And the reason we're going to do that is simply this example right here. I think when a lot of students hear the term run-on sentence, they assume that this error always has something to do with the length of their sentences. And this isn't really the case. So if we take a look at this very, very short example here, I like apples, they are tasty. This is actually an example of a run-on sentence, even though it's very, very short. So we're going to use this terminology, fused sentences, from this point forward, and we'll take a look at the definition, then we'll come back to this and we'll see what we need to do with it. So a fused sentence features two or more clauses, but lacks the appropriate punctuation and or conjunction. So what does this mean? Well, let's talk about the clauses first. A clause has a subject and a verb and can stand on its own as a sentence. So our first example, I like apples. We have a subject, a verb, full sentence. Our second example here, they are tasty. So we have a subject, we have a verb. This too could stand on its own as a sentence. So we have two clauses here. But the problem is we don't have punctuation and or conjunctions that show the relationship between these two. So there are numerous ways we could fix this fused sentence. The easiest way, if you see a fused sentence, to fix it is simply to change it to two separate sentences. So I like apples, they are tasty. This is no longer an example of a fused sentence. Other ways we could fix this problem, we could use a different kind of punctuation, perhaps a semicolon. We could also forego punctuation entirely and choose a conjunction, a connecting word that shows the relationship between these two clauses. So I like apples because they are tasty. Those examples that we looked at with the period in between these two clauses, or this example as it stands now, are both fine sentences, and they are no longer fused sentences. So let's take a look at a longer bit, a paragraph that has a few examples of fused sentences, and we'll see if we can fix them. So I'll read this to you quickly just so we get an idea of what we're looking at, and then we'll take a look at a few of the examples of fused sentences. I suppose that I could simply walk away, I could avoid the dragon and concentrate on various side missions offered by my favorite video game. I could buy a solution, perhaps in the form of a special sword or piece of armor that would counter a dragon's formidable arsenal. I could, of course, simply turn off my Xbox and relegate dragon slaying to the same place we put all of our problems that we are not properly equipped to counter. So there are a few fused sentences in here that I've added just for the benefit of this tutorial. I should also tell you that as I was reading this, I found myself pausing naturally at those places where punctuation or conjunctions are actually necessary. So one way to test your writing for fused sentences is to read it and see if you pause naturally at places where you haven't included that punctuation or conjunction. That might be an indication that you have a fused sentence in your work. So let's take a look at what I have here. Right up to here. This is an example of a fused sentence. I suppose that I could simply walk away. I could avoid the dragon. Right here, by simply putting a period, I can fix this problem of a fused sentence. Now, I should point out as we look at this example that it's actually a fairly complex example because it looks like here, going back to our earlier rule about a clause, it looks like we actually could do something here. But if we go back to that idea of the test, that these ideas, if we separate them by a period, should be able to stand on their own as complete sentences, we can see that there's a problem here. If I put a period here, I suppose, period, it works, it's got a subject and a verb. It's certainly out of context here, but it meets the requirement of a full sentence. If we take a look at the second bit, that I could simply walk away. even though I have a subject and a verb here, this isn't a complete idea. It's clearly relying too much on, it's relying on this first clause to make it to make sense. So this is an example of a time where even though we have a subject and a verb here and what looks like a subject and a verb here, this is actually a complete idea as it stands. It's not an example of a fused sentence, and we don't have to separate it. As we go on to our next example, I could avoid the dragon and concentrate on the various side missions offered by my favorite video game. I could buy a solution. You can see here, right, again, I'd pause naturally here, right? And this is another example right here of a fused sentence where we had two sentences that could stand on their own. Here's the first half right here, and the second half right here. And I had neglected to include punctuation or conjunctions that show the relationship between these ideas. So as you progress in your own work, what I would like you to look for are those natural pauses when you read your work aloud. Okay, and if you read it aloud and you find yourself pausing, that may be an indication that we're looking at fused sentences. I'd also like you to take a look for subject and the subject and the verbs that you're using in your writing. So, and again, be careful here, because simply because you have a subject and a verb twice in one sentence here, as we have here, or at least what appears to be twice in one sentence, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a fused sentence. Remember too that to meet our requirements for a fused sentence, we need to see two clauses that could stand on their own, but that lack the appropriate punctuation or conjunction to join these ideas. So hopefully this has helped you understand what a fused sentence is and how you can avoid it in your own writing.